Hello, time for another vlog, because I don't know why. Should do something, I suppose. Just going to talk about a few bits that I've been thinking about this week, really. One thing, I have here, just arrived, a camera stabilizer thing, so that when I'm walking around, hopefully, the camera will not wobble so much. I'm a little concerned about carrying it in public because it draws attention to the camera, and that could be a problem. Don't want to get it stolen or anything. However, we'll see how it goes. I think you're pretty safe in London on the whole. That's how I found it anyway. I mean, with a camera just around your neck, nobody takes any notice of it because there's like millions, literally millions of tourists come to London every year. But with that, you don't see many people carrying a stabilizer around, so it will draw a bit of attention, but we'll see. However, I don't know if I'm going to be able to film much soon because the weather forecast, at least for the next week, is not much good. Cloud, rain, that sort of thing. London, right. Actually, also, of course, we don't get the weather like Hurricane Irma and stuff like that in Florida and the Caribbean. Or Caribbean if you're American. Well, we do, but by the time those hurricanes are blown across the North American continent and back across the Atlantic, they're just like little storms or blustery days and cloudy weather like that. So we get, like in the autumn, which is I suppose hurricane season, late summer, I don't know, we tend to get blustery days, storms, that sort of thing. Not usually very big storms by hurricane standards, but still enough to blow away your umbrella, put it that way, sometimes. So we've got that to look forward to over here. Hurricane Irma hasn't arrived here yet. It'll just be a depression when it gets here, just a windy day. And not 135 miles an hour or anything, more like 20. Because the North Atlantic is not all that warm, so it doesn't power up. Still, looking forward to it. I'm wondering where I should go. I haven't been into town much with it lately, so maybe I might wander around in town again, Oxford Street maybe. I don't know if you have any ideas of places you'd like me to go, just let me know. And if it's feasible, I don't mind going to various places in London anyway. I don't want to go where I have to pay, because I'm not earning my fortune yet on YouTube, and this stabilizer cost me a fortune. Well, half a fortune. It wasn't I got the cheapest decent one, AFI. I'm thinking it's a decent one. I mean, there's ones that are twice the price, which do get much better reviews, but I'm not going to spend like £500 or £600 when I'm making like 2 figures out of YouTube a month. Just right. When I'm rich from YouTube, I can invest in it. Well, I invest in it now. I got that after all, but I mean, you have to put a bit in up front for any sort of venture, I suppose. But it can hardly be called a business at this stage because it's not profitable at all. It's just a hobby at the moment, and it would be nice. I want it to get me like £500 a month. What's that? $700, say, a month, because that would be sufficient, assuming I also had somewhere to live that I didn't have to pay for. That would be sufficient to live on. I'd have to sort out accommodation somehow, but I don't know how I'd do that. But still, that's if you like, an interim target, and I'm nowhere near it. Okay, nowhere near it at all. So there you go. Other than that, I've been thinking about my video that I did last week or the week before on Enlightenment, Escaping the Matrix Part 5, where I was talking about living in the now, Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. Have I got that here? Yeah. Look. That book. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I put a link in that video. His Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment, which I think he's right. And I've sort of come to the conclusion before, when looking at enlightenment, that effectively silencing or ignoring the mind, the verbal mind, is the key. And the point is not so much to ignore it or to silence it. That's like a method of getting there. The point is to not identify with it at all. That is to understand that it is not you. You are the person, the consciousness, not the little jabbering demon in your head, right? You are not your body. That's just the accumulation of all the food you've eaten over the years. It's your consciousness seems to be separate, and I might do a video about how consciousness and psychic phenomena may be compatible with modern physics, because the old materialist paradigm doesn't really have any space for it. But since quantum mechanics, that's really quite out of date. And although a lot of skeptics still go on about how psychic phenomena are nonsense and how consciousness even doesn't exist, I don't know how they can figure that out, but anyway, it is actually consistent with modern physics. So I'll do a video about that, maybe. I'm thinking about it. But I was thinking in terms of this book and silencing the mind, or ignoring it, if you like. If you're living in the perpetual present moment with no thought of past or future, if our ancestors were, then language presumably wouldn't have evolved in the first place, because we wouldn't have needed it. You at least need to be able to say something like, there's a mammoth down the road, shall we go and get it? Let's have some lunch. That is, though, a little bit of past and future. The mammoth, you saw it in the past. If it's down the road, they can see it anyway. You just go, ugh, ugh. And people go, oh, ooh. They don't need language. Okay, so that sort of simple thing. But once we got some language, things got a lot more complicated, because we were able to work stuff out and collaborate better. But you'll see that other animals don't need anything more than a few very basic symbols. I think gorillas have a gesture language, and they can understand a human vocabulary of up to about 200 odd words if trained. Chimpanzees do a bit better, but I don't know if chimpanzees have a gesture language. I guess our ancestors did, because we wave our hands about when we're talking. So that strongly suggests that we have some sort of gesture language, and of course a lot of these gestures are actually pretty much universal as well, so they're very basic within us. But if there was no real thought for the past or future, we wouldn't have needed to evolve language. So it's probably like a phase we're going through of ego, which the language module maintains, because when we identify with it, we think it's us, and then we're thinking, oh, I should be like this, I should be like that, I did that badly, I did that well, aren't I great, aren't I terrible, oh, my life is so horrible, whatever, I must get rich, otherwise nobody will love me, and I need the power, or whatever, stuff like that, all this rubbish that we think. It's probably a phase that we have to go through. And once we've done it, we can learn to use the mind properly, not indiscriminately. So at the moment, the majority of people just have this blathering voice inside them, going on and on and on and on, constantly. And we can learn to leave it until we actually need to use it for things. And I've been practicing that, and it's a lot more relaxing. And he's right in here about it, I think. So you can do the exercise from that Power of the Matrix, or Escaping the Matrix Part 5, Enlightenment, and see what I mean. With a bit of practice, you can keep your mind quiet for several seconds, and even longer over time. It gets gradually easier, but you do have to persist and focus on it quite a lot at first, and focus on the outside world, and focus on how your body feels as well. Focus on things and not on the thoughts, as a way of training it to be silent. And it does learn gradually, and it's more efficient. So I'm thinking that humanity, or at least some individuals, can transcend the ego. You still need it and use it for certain things. It's a tool like everything else, but it becomes a burden and a source of what the Buddhists would call suffering, which I suppose it is, if it's there all the time, effectively in control, because it's not really a positive thing. It's thinking about things that can go wrong all the time, or things that have gone wrong, and how can you fix them and all that. You can see there's obvious survival value in that, but we just don't need to do it anything like that much, certainly not in the modern world. We can actually leave it for when we need it. And the effort to be somebody is something really that children need, perhaps, because they have to survive in a world where effectively they've got no power, and they're dependent on parents and guardians and teachers and all the rest of it, and their peers. So the pressure for survival is very strong with them, and so they do work on their egos. They talk to themselves a lot more than adults do when they're playing, for example. They're developing their idea of who they are, how they can fit in. But the thing is, once you know that, you can go past it. You don't need to keep on trying to fit in. You know how to do that. And once you know, as an adult, leave it. I'm working on it. Another thing I was thinking about was conspiracy theories, and how do they spread, and so on. I was looking at an old article in a Scientific American recently, and what they found, the scientists, was that the kinds of theories that spread well are the ones where there's someone or something to blame, and obviously ones that conform to people's preconceived conceptions to some extent anyway. They didn't discuss in this article what counts as a conspiracy theory, though. I've seen previous studies where they choose various things, but there's no real... It's just assumed that these things are false. And yet some conspiracy theories do turn out to be true, after all. And some things which the majority of people accept as true are not. They are actually conspiracy theories. For example, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Those lies which the Bush administration told us all, and which were pretty transparently lies even in the first place, were effectively believed by most people. And that's a conspiracy theory. It gives us someone to blame, Saddam Hussein. And, of course, many people do believe that the Middle East is a source of a lot of trouble and needs to be brought under control somehow. So it conforms to that kind of belief. I would agree that there's a lot of hassle in the Middle East and it needs to be sorted out, but whether it needs to be done by us or just left to themselves to sort it out, I don't know. It's not clear whether it would be left to themselves, or if the West wasn't intervening, would somebody else, and that might be worse. So I don't know. But conspiracy theories. You've got David Icke's idea that the world is ruled by shape-shifting lizards from another dimension, or something like that. He says it's literally true. I tend to treat it as a metaphor. He sold lots of books on the subject, let's face it. So there's that aspect of it as well. Whether he really believes it or not, he's making money out of it, which is something to consider. And again, you've got the shape-shifting lizards to blame. You've got maybe the high-ups, Queen Elizabeth, and so on. Top business people, maybe, things like that to blame. And many people do feel that the world is not under the control of the ordinary person. And there's lots of evidence for that, let's face it. So it isn't, but the article didn't say what they counted as conspiracy theories in this case. But it just does need to be borne in mind that it can be hard to tell what is true and what is not. I would say the crazier it sounds, the better the evidence needs to be. And I've listened to David Icke videos, for example, where he says he's going to explain, the evidence for these lizards and stuff. But the last one I watched, which was not long ago, a couple of weeks, he got to the point where he was going to explain the evidence, and then he said, well, actually there's too much of it to explain in this short lecture, which was like 6 hours long, okay. And he skipped it. So, not good enough. Right. One other thing that was found out, though, was that when people debunk conspiracy theories, the people who watch them actually ended up being 30% more likely to spend more time looking at conspiracy theories after they've been debunked. So what that tells me is that if you want to debunk conspiracy theories, straightforwardly debunking them is not the way to go, because it's because of human nature, it clashes with people's ego. When you debunk something which people believe, you're insulting their intelligence, you're crushing their ego, right? So it's not the way to go. Don't debunk. Instead, just casually sow the seeds of doubt. And leave it at that, because people will debunk it for themselves, and that's better because they've thought it through. Okay, and it doesn't challenge their egos. In fact, it's good for them because they've figured something out for themselves, right? So if you do want to debunk a conspiracy theory, bear in mind that it increases the odds by 30% of people going to look at more. So people can kind of retrench when they're pushed. Rather than listening to the evidence, they'll dismiss it with any excuse. Instead, just leave a little doubt, and that's it. I think that's a better way to go. One interesting point the article made about conspiracy theories was that they're rather like religion, in that you've got your in crowd, and you've also got certain people or things endowed with what are effectively divine powers. If you believe there's a big business conspiracy to rule the world, or something like that, or these big pyramids of power that various conspirators talk about, then if you actually think about it objectively, there's an enormous amount of coordination and stuff which would be needed to keep that and get it going and keep it going. There's no doubt there are conspiracies going on, but they're not all powerful, I think. And when a large amount of power and conspiratorial organisation is postulated, that's effectively turning these conspirators into gods. So it's a kind of religion, which people don't realise it's a secular one rather than a supernatural one, if you like, or superstitious one. I don't know what you call it. What's the opposite of secular? Religious? I don't know. Yeah. So there's that. And again, there's always the bother that some conspiracies are true, but they're usually not that big and powerful. However, we do know, obviously, that the ruling classes are working very hard at being in control of everything. And they're not all idealists who believe in democracy and stuff. Clearly, the political systems kind of subvert democracy quite a lot. Or they'll consult and then do what they want anyway. This sort of thing. And they'll let you protest and ignore it, and so on. It's. I think the pendulum's starting to swing back the other way, and people are starting to be listened to more. It's gone too far. So we may have some improvement over the next generation, which would be a good thing, I think. But it needs an educated population, and of course the population has been dumbed down pretty badly. So it's all chaos, basically. Who knows what's going to happen? Nuclear war in North Korea, maybe. Still can't predict that properly. No idea. I would think the best way to go would be to bung a load of cruise missiles in there if he starts a war. Whether we should start it, I don't know. We should stop him having nuclear weapons, but then we've got nuclear weapons in the West. America, Britain, France, other countries. Okay. So it's a bit hypocritical to stop other people having them. But that's the way the world is. And it's probably a good thing to stop certain nutcases having them. So I would not be terribly opposed to a few cruise missiles to go in and take out North Korea's nuclear capability. But it would have to be done after considerable provocation, obviously. And it would probably be worth giving them some advance warning so they could clear people out of the area. Not that they probably would, but if they don't, then knock down his palace instead. Another thing I was reading about, there's a lot of articles around these days saying that modern medical science means that humans are not evolving anymore. We've subverted evolution. I think that is obviously not true. Lots of people die young, so there's evolution at work. Sure, we can cure some diseases and help with them, but even in those cases there's a small chance of an earlier death or of less breeding. Even so, it does have an effect, but it's not very much, not such a strong effect as it would have had in the days before decent medicine, or in the days when we had terrible medicine. And a study has found, this was based on, in America and Britain, where people have had their genetic ancestry measured by various companies. So the anonymised data set was, as it was examined, of quite large numbers of people, and what they found, the scientists, was that the genes that are associated with Alzheimer's and the genes that are associated with heavy smoking, one gene in each case, was rarer in older people. So what that tells us is that people who have those genes die younger, which means on average they will breed a little bit less. So evolution is at work, basically, still. And maybe in a few generations heavy smoking will be gone and Alzheimer's will be gone, perhaps, or at least much reduced, because evolution is slowly eliminating it. And there'll be other things, because nature is a mess, you know. So, well, that's it. I've got to think about where to go with the stabiliser and whether to go out when it's all cloudy and horrible. It looks like it's going to rain today, so that's not good. We shall see. If you've got any suggestions of where to go or any other comments, then stick them in the comments below, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye for now.